Not every cold open is going to start on my street in the rain, but I am going to continue this time because I want to teach you a little bit about how Cambodian housing works and how my apartment is. So this is a building site across the street from my apartment. And let's see, down the road a little bit here is another building site. Both rather annoying because I moved to this street because it was a quiet street. But it's not very quiet now. It is at this time of the day because the builders haven't arrived yet. But when they've arrived, we'll have all kinds of mechanical noises. What I also want to show you here are the steps leading up to apartments on the upper floors. And it's interesting to note that stairs for apartment buildings in Cambodia are typically on the outside of the building, which saves space on the inside. Very, very efficient. Okay, now let me move around and show you a little bit of my balcony. Here you can see the windows leading into my sitting room. And then outside on my balcony I have my drying rack, which I don't use outside because there's too much builder's dust. Everybody else hangs their clothes outside, which I can't understand, except that it's a general tendency in Asia to dry clothes outside because they believe it'll be fresher. Well, I think the builder's dust does that in for me. Okay, there's my easy chair where I sit in the daytime just to get the cool breezes. My balcony faces north, so there's very little sun, and it's a very pleasant place, even though the weather is kind of hot. Okay, and so this is my balcony, and you can see my floors are all parquet. There's my steps leading down, and on the way in, my little shrine with some food offerings and some incense. And now we'll go inside. Well, I'd say that as we enter these hallowed halls slowly, or maybe they call them my humble abode, we need a little fanfare. Well, here we are inside my apartment, and the first thing I'll say is that it's untidy, and I'm not going to apologize for it. But I'm also going to say that if you think, oh, typical man, then I'm going to say that I don't like any kind of statement that begins with men are or women are. I know plenty of women that are untidy, and I know plenty of men who are tidy. So we'll just get that kind of overgeneralization and stereotype out of the way. But yes, I'm untidy. I'm clean, but untidy. All right, here's my desk. You can see my laptop. You can see my mate and bombilla. Here's my tripod for making my headshots for my videos. And you'll also see that I have a tendency to organize horizontally. That is, if it's a horizontal space and I'm not using it for sitting in, then it's going to have something on it. In this case, it's got my computer and some clippers and some adapters. And then moving over here, we have the space where I heat my water and keep various odds and ends. And then we'll move around here, and I'll get closer in a minute my television, and beside the television is my shrine. Let's move a little closer to the shrine. Here we are in close-up. Now the shrine outside is a Cambodian shrine. It's for the hungry ghosts that come around, and it provides them a little food so that they are welcome here. The building also has ancestral ghosts, but my landlord and landlady take care of them with their own shrine, so I just need to take care of the hungry ghosts. Okay, this shrine is personal to me, and it contains things that are important to me. It's about the only thing I carry that is, in some sense, useless. My whole belongings fit into 2 suitcases, and it's mostly clothes, but I have a few personal items, and here you can see a few of them. They're all things that were given to me by other people. Right in the center at the back is my mother's photo, and behind that is a flag of Kyrgyzstan that I got at the World Nomad Games. There is a special elf from Argentina, a postcard from Italy, Hello Kitty, some Bermuda sand, a cross that is a sun catcher. Down in there is also a cross made of olive wood from Jerusalem, a bombija, a giant anteater, some patchouli oil, a candle, and some incense. Now I'll take you down my hallway, and you can see my bicycle. It's a nuisance having to keep it in the apartment, but when I kept it chained outside, I had pieces stolen from it, so now I keep it inside. And into my bedroom. And you'll see I have a double bed with a nice headrest, and sitting on the bed is yet another laptop. I have 3 laptops, not because I need 3 laptops, but because they keep breaking in one way or another, and I keep ending up with new ones. This one has some problems with the monitor and with the hard drive. And now on to my second bedroom. Okay, coming into my second bedroom, again, no apologies for untidiness. I don't use it very often. I do have guests, and when they do, I promise to make the bed if you happen to come my way. Big cabinet where I store a few winter clothes, which I never use, of course, because there's no need here in Cambodia. And then my drying rack, because I dry my clothes indoors away from builder's dust. Now let's move down the hallway to the back of my apartment, where there is my kitchen and my bathroom. Okay, I think I've shown you some parts of my kitchen before, but I'll just show you again. My stove, which is run on bottled gas, then some oils and sauces, and around to my sink. And then if we keep going around, we get to my oven. Now, ovens are not common in Cambodia. In fact, almost nobody has one. I had to buy this one specially. It didn't come with the apartment, but I need it for all of my baking and roasting needs. And you can see I have almost no preparation space. Just this place where I keep my cutting board and knives, then more sauces and more seasonings. And then if we go up here to the refrigerator, to the top of the refrigerator, you can see yet more spices and seasonings. And then the top of my washing machine, where I keep some of my vegetables and fruits, not many. Most of them I have to keep in the refrigerator, because of the heat. Most things spoil very quickly if they're kept out, but I do keep a few odds and ends up here, and also some more seasonings, so that when I do my laundry, then I have to put these all somewhere else. Now here out back I have another balcony, and you can see these steps that lead up to a terrace on the roof. I have a complete terrace that runs the full length of the apartment, but on these steps I currently have my garden, and my garden's not very full right now because I was away for a month in Borneo in June, and so I had to start again. So I'm just starting again now, but I'll show you some pictures of what my garden looks like when it's in full bloom and full fruit. So here is my garden as it was a little over a year ago. There's a door out the back of my kitchen that leads here to these steps, and I had my garden here, not much of a garden, but I had a lot of herbs and a few fruit. You can see some tomatoes along the right hand side, and here's a close-up of the flowers of the tomatoes and green tomato. And now we have some of the herbs. This was coriander growing in a coconut shell, and something I don't know, and a creeping flower that didn't actually mature, and a lot of herbs, particularly basil, and then some of my flowers, mostly sunflowers. They did particularly well. I did grow other flowers, but the sunflowers were my pride. Now we have something of an experiment. I'm going to cook for you, but I'm going to cook something that I'm going to invent on the spot. I do that all the time for myself, but I'm going to do it for you today. So here we have my frying pan with some extra virgin olive oil heating in it, ready for some onions and leeks and garlic to go in. And I'm going to make a kind of lasagna, although it's not really lasagna, because I'm going to make it with flour tortillas and with a Mexican filling of chicken and tomatoes and cumin and oregano. And it's based on a burrito casserole that I made for a potluck about 15 years ago, and never repeated it. I just made all these burritos and put them in a casserole and poured a tomato sauce on top of them and took them to the potluck, and everyone thought, oh, this is wonderful, this is lasagna, but it wasn't. Okay, so we start with a chopped up mix of onions and leeks. Now I always like to mix up my onion family. Sometimes, a lot of the time in fact, I just use leeks. I use onions less and less, although in Asia it's actually quite hard to find leeks, but you can find them, and I usually have them on hand. This is sauteing over medium-high heat. All I want is to get the onions transparent. I don't want them to take on any color. I just want them to cook down a little, also the leeks and the garlic. I don't want, obviously, the garlic to take on any color because it becomes bitter. But in this particular dish, I just want everything to be transparent but cooked through. And one of the things that I've always noticed in recipes is that when they give you times for things, they never allow enough time for the cooking of onions and leeks. To brown onions successfully, to caramelize them, will take about 25 minutes if you do it right. But they always say, oh, caramelize for 5 minutes or something like that. They're really not thinking straight. Anyway, I'm not going to give you a recipe as such here, partly because I have no idea what I'm doing. but partly because my way of cooking doesn't usually involve recipes, and I'm in fact in the process of writing a book called The Chameleon Cook, which is all about how you cook without recipes. So I almost never follow recipes, and when I give recipes in my blog, sometimes I give quantities, but a lot of the time I don't, because I never use quantities when I actually cook. I mean, here is 1 onion, 1 leek, 1 clove of garlic, and now 1 can of tomatoes. I use canned tomatoes for a reason. Probably about 40 years ago, maybe even longer, I was watching a cooking show, and the chef, can't remember who it was, might have been the Galloping Gourmet, don't remember, could have been Philip Arbin, said that canned tomatoes are better than fresh tomatoes for making sauce. And at the time I thought that was a bit strange, but I do make sauces using fresh Romas and using canned, and I actually find that in sauces like this, canned is better, as long as you read the ingredients on the can, because sometimes you'll find that they're canned with sugar or with extra salt or with some preservatives that you don't want. This can is tomatoes and citric acid, and that's it. So that was all I needed, and so I'm just now cooking it down. I need to add a little more fluid because it's thick and there's just not enough there for me to make my casserole. So I have next to it, you can't see it, but next to it I have a pot of chicken and leek stock. I boiled a chicken. I'm going to use the chicken meat in the casserole, but I'm going to use the stock here just to flavor the sauce a little more and also to thin it down a little. I'm going to be simmering for about an hour. Right now I just need to add a little more stock, and then I'm going to add some more seasonings, and after that we'll be done. Now, one of the things that you may notice is that I do not cook with salt. I haven't cooked with salt for close to 35 years. And I'm not sure why I began cooking without salt, but here's the thing that's very important to know, is that if you are used to salt, if you taste something without salt, it tastes really bland. But if you give it a week or a couple of weeks, then you'll find that it tastes fine. All right, so here's some cumin. I have a tendency to add a fair amount of spices and herbs, maybe because there's no salt, I don't know. But that's a couple of spoons of cumin, and I'm using powdered oregano. It's also very strong. I would use fresh oregano, and if my garden were better than it is, it would have oregano in it, and I would be able to use fresh oregano. I use the powdered just because it's convenient, and I could use dried leaves as well, but the powdered is convenient enough. So the flavorings are cumin and oregano, no salt. I get enough salt daily by odds and ends that I eat that have salt in them, and I use soy sauce. Salt. You need sodium in your diet somehow, and I get plenty one way or another without salt. I'm not recommending it. If you like salt, that's fine, but I used to have really low blood pressure, and I put part of that down to not using salt. I also don't drink coffee or tea or caffeinated beverages in general, so that may be it, although I did have high blood pressure at one point despite all of that. So you can see that it's now cooked down and is quite thick, and I tasted it a few minutes ago and decided it needed something. So I'm going to add a few chiles just to make it a little bit piquant. Let them cook down just a few minutes. And meanwhile, I'm going to make a really important point. When you're cooking sauces or stews or soups that cook a long time, you must taste all the time. When you read recipes, they say, you know, cook for an hour or cook for 2 hours, and then it says adjust seasonings. Well, it's much better if you taste. There was a secretary in the office at my university many years ago who liked to cook, and she was a little bit adventurous, and I suggested a recipe for her at one point, and she tried it, and I asked her the next day, how did it go? And she said, well, it wasn't bad, but it seemed a bit bland. And I asked her, did you taste it before you served it? And she said, oh, no, I just followed the recipe and served it, and it seemed a bit bland. Well, that's a huge mistake. When you're cooking sauces, when you're cooking soups, when you're cooking stews on the stovetop, not in the oven, it's a little bit harder there, but on the stovetop, taste all the time. So I tasted this a little while ago and decided that it just needed a little bit of piquancy, and so I'm adding the chiles now. And before I use the sauce, I'm going to taste it one more time to see if it is piquant enough. Alright, well, the sauce is made, and I've also got some chopped up chicken meat. I boiled the chicken and used that to make cockaliki soup, but then I saved a lot of the chicken for this dish. And you see, this dish is more or less like a lasagna, except it's got a Mexican quality because it's made not with pasta but with tortillas, and otherwise it looks like a layered lasagna. So let's get started. I've got one tortilla in the bottom, and now I'm going to add a little bit of sauce. I'm going to add some chicken meat. And a layer of cheese. It would be nice if I could get a Mexican cheese, but I can't. I can't get much cheese of any sort in Asia, so I'm having to do the best I can with what I've got. Now I'm going to add another tortilla. And layer of sauce. Chicken. Cheese. Now I'm going to fold the top layer over. When I made these originally, I made them using regular burritos rather than making this sort of lasagna style dish. And see, now I've turned it over, and I'm going to add another layer of sauce to everything. So it's almost like a pie. And a final layer of cheese. And now I'm going to pop that into a 250 degrees centigrade oven to melt the cheese and to blend all the flavors. So here is the finished product taken out of the casserole, and it didn't quite turn out the way I had imagined. It's a little bit loose and doesn't actually look particularly appetizing, although it was in fact delicious even in this form. But I thought, well, I can't really serve this to my guests, so I did this. Second go around, I put the filling on a tortilla, and then I added some yogurt and some chopped up leeks. So now we have La Bandera Mexicana, the Mexican flag, and that seems to be appropriate. So in the end, I rolled up the tortilla, made myself a burrito, and it was also delicious. And that's the way I'm gonna go with that recipe in future. I'll probably doctor it a little bit. But now we're back out on my street in the early morning yet again, and I'm going to finish up here and think that I might in the future do a video on the street life on my street. Otherwise, see you next time.